I was 3 blocks from home when I saw her standing in my driveway like a traffic cop, arms crossed, face pinched with the kind of righteous fury only a certain breed of suburban homeowner can muster at 7 in the morning. The snow had started falling around midnight, one of those heavy February storms that buried everything under 18 inches of white silence. I had been at the hospital for the past 14 hours, pulling a double shift in the emergency department, because half our staff couldn't make it in. My Jeep Cherokee, mud-splattered and road-weary, rumbled through the quiet streets of Lakewood, Ohio, past identical Tudor-style homes with their perfectly manicured yards now hidden beneath thick blankets of powder. I was exhausted, hungry, and desperately needed a shower. The last thing I wanted was a confrontation with Brenda Patterson, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association and the self-appointed guardian of our neighborhood's moral fiber. I pulled into my driveway slowly, the Jeep's tires crunching through the fresh snow. Brenda didn't move. She stood there in her puffy North Face jacket, designer snow boots that probably cost more than my monthly utilities, and a knitted hat with a ridiculous pom-pom on top that bobbed indignantly as she stepped directly in front of my vehicle, forcing me to stop. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, willing myself to find patience I didn't have. Through the windshield, I could see her mouth moving, shouting something I couldn't hear over the heater's fan. I sighed, grabbed my go bag from the passenger seat and opened the door. The cold hit me like a physical force, that bone-deep February chill that Ohio does so well. I stepped out, my boots sinking into snow that came halfway up my shins. "Brandon Blake, don't you dare act like you don't see me standing here," Brenda said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She was in her late 40s, with highlighted blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and the kind of angular features that seemed permanently arranged in disapproval. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have even the slightest comprehension of the laws you've violated?" I closed the Jeep door, hoisting my bag over my shoulder. "Good morning to you too, Brenda. Nice weather we're having. Don't get cute with me." She pulled out her phone, waving it like evidence in a murder trial. "There is a level 3 snow emergency in effect. Has been since 1 o'clock this morning. That means no unauthorized travel. None. Zero. And yet here you are, gallivanting around town like the rules don't apply to you." I took a deep breath, watching it fog in the frigid air. I wasn't gallivanting, I was working. Working. She said it like I'd claimed to be on the moon. "Everyone is working from home today, Brandon. That's what responsible citizens do during a snow emergency. They stay home. They don't risk the lives of our brave first responders who have to rescue them when they inevitably slide into a ditch. Brenda, I really don't have the energy for this right now. I've been up for almost 24 hours and I just want to get inside, take a shower, and maybe sleep for a few days. You'll have plenty of time to sleep after I report you to the city. Level 3 means no travel except for absolute emergencies. That's the law. You broke it, and there are consequences." She was already typing on her phone, thumbs moving with practiced efficiency. "I have your license plate number, the exact time of your violation, photographic evidence, and 3 neighbors who witnessed your reckless disregard for public safety." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the memory of the 6-year-old kid I'd helped intubate 4 hours ago, a car accident victim whose father thought he could make it to work despite the storm. Maybe it was just Brenda's voice, that grating tone of absolute certainty that she was right and everyone else was wrong. "I'm a paramedic," I said, my voice flat. "I work at Metro Health Medical Center. I'm exempt from travel bans." So unless you want to explain to the city why you're harassing an emergency medical professional who just spent 14 hours keeping people alive, I suggest you get out of my driveway." Brenda's expression didn't change. If anything, her eyes narrowed further. "I don't believe you." "Excuse me." "I said I don't believe you. You've never mentioned being a paramedic. I've lived across the street from you for 3 years, and I've never once seen you in a uniform." "I change at the hospital, Brenda. I don't walk around my house in my work clothes. Convenient." She took a step closer, tilting her phone screen toward me. "You know how many people try to claim exemptions during snow emergencies? Do you know how many excuses I hear on a daily basis from people who think the HOA rules don't apply to them?" "Well, I've heard them all, and I'm not falling for this one." My hands tightened on the strap of my bag. Inside were my hospital ID, my paramedic certification, my credentials that would immediately prove everything I was saying. But the principle of the thing, the sheer audacity of this woman demanding I justify my existence to her, made me resist the urge to simply show her the proof and end this ridiculous conversation. "Brenda, I'm going inside. I'm cold, I'm tired, and I'm done with this conversation. If you want to report me to the city, go ahead. They'll tell you exactly what I just told you." I moved past her, wading through the snow toward my front door. Behind me, I heard her gasp like I'd physically struck her. "You don't walk away from me, Brandon Blake. I am the HOA president. I have authority here. You signed the covenant when you bought this house, which means you agreed to abide by all community standards and regulations, which includes respecting the board and its officers." I stopped, keys in hand, and turned back to face her. "The HOA doesn't have authority over state and local emergency vehicle exemptions, Brenda. That's not how any of this works. We'll see about that." She was typing furiously again. "I'm contacting our attorney right now, and the police, and city council. You think you can just do whatever you want? You think rules don't apply to you because you claim to have some special job? Claim to have." I felt my jaw tighten. "Are you seriously suggesting I'm lying about being a paramedic?" "I'm suggesting that people lie all the time to avoid consequences for their actions. I'm suggesting that if you really were a paramedic, you would have mentioned it before. It's not exactly the kind of thing people keep secret." She paused, a calculating look crossing her face. "Unless, of course, you're not actually certified. Unless you're one of those people who takes a first aid class and then goes around telling everyone there in the medical field." The absolute certainty in her voice, the way she'd constructed an entire narrative in her head where I was the villain and she was the hero protecting the neighborhood from my deception, was almost impressive in its delusion. "I'm going inside," I said again. "Have a nice day, Brenda." This time I didn't look back. I unlocked my door, stepped into the blessed warmth of my house, and closed the door firmly behind me. Through the front window, I could see Brenda still standing in my driveway, phone pressed to her ear, gesticulating wildly at someone who was probably very confused about why they were receiving a 7 in the morning phone call about a neighbor's alleged snow emergency violation. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my boots, and headed straight for the kitchen. Coffee first, then a shower, then sleep. I'd deal with whatever nonsense Brenda was cooking up later after I'd had at least 6 hours of unconsciousness and maybe some actual food. The house was quiet, exactly as I'd left it the previous morning. I lived alone, had since my divorce 2 years ago, and while the solitude had been difficult at first, I'd grown to appreciate it. No one to answer to, no one to explain my weird schedule to, no one to complain when I got called in for emergency shifts on holidays or weekends. The coffee maker gurgled to life and I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes for just a moment. Images from the night flashed behind my eyelids. The car accident victims. The elderly woman with pneumonia. The teenager who'd crashed his snowmobile into a tree. The steady stream of cold-related injuries and storm-caused traumas that always followed major weather events. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from one of my coworkers. Instead, I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a text from my neighbor 2 doors down, Michael Chen. "Dude, Brenda is on a warpath. Just gave her your number. Sorry, man. She threatened to fine me for my trash cans being out too early last week. Good luck." I stared at the message, then at the 3 missed calls, then back at the message. Of course she'd gotten my number. Of course she had. Brenda Patterson collected information on every resident in Willowbrook Estates like some people collected stamps. She probably had spreadsheets, color-coded spreadsheets. My phone rang again. Same unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. "What?" I answered, not bothering to hide my irritation. "Brandon Blake. This is Brenda Patterson from the Willowbrook Estates HOA board. I've been trying to reach you regarding a serious violation of both community standards and municipal law. It's imperative that we discuss this immediately." "Brenda, you were literally just in my driveway. We already discussed this." "That was an informal conversation. This is official HOA business. I need you to provide documentation proving your employment status and your supposed exemption from the snow emergency order. Until such time as you can produce satisfactory evidence, the HOA board is moving forward with filing a formal complaint with the Lakewood Police Department and issuing you a citation for violations of community standards, specifically Section 4.7 of the HOA Covenant, regarding compliance with local and state laws. I poured coffee into a mug, watching the dark liquid swirl. "Brenda, I'm not providing you with anything right now because I just worked a 14-hour shift and I'm about to collapse. When I wake up, if you're still concerned about this, I'll be happy to show you my hospital ID and explain, once again, how emergency vehicle exemptions work. This is exactly the kind of dismissive attitude I'm talking about. You show no respect for the community standards we've worked so hard to maintain. You show no respect for the authority of the HOA board. And frankly, Brandon, your property has been a source of concern for quite some time." I paused, mug halfway to my lips. "What are you talking about?" "Your lawn was half an inch too long in September. You parked your vehicle on the street overnight 3 times in October instead of in your garage. Your holiday decorations were up until January 7th when the covenant clearly states they must be removed by January 5th. And now this. This flagrant violation of a snow emergency, this complete disregard for public safety and community standards." She was on a roll now, voice rising with each accusation. "The board has been lenient with you, Brandon. We've let these infractions slide because we believe in giving residents opportunities to correct their behavior. But this is beyond the pale. My grass was too long," I repeated slowly. "In September. Half an inch too long, yes. The covenant specifies grass height cannot exceed 3 inches. Yours was 3.5, and you measured it. Of course I measured it. That's my job as HOA president, to ensure all residents are in compliance." I took a long drink of coffee, letting the caffeine hit my system. "Brenda, I need to go now. I need to sleep. We can continue this conversation later." "We will continue this conversation when I say we continue it. The board is meeting this evening at 7 o'clock. I expect you to attend and address these violations in person. I'm working tonight. I pick up a shift at 6. Then you'll need to call in sick, won't you? Because attendance is mandatory when a resident is facing disciplinary action. Mandatory, I said. You think you can mandate I skip work to attend an HOA meeting? I think you can demonstrate a basic level of respect for the community you chose to live in. 7 o'clock, Brandon. The meeting is at my house. Don't be late. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what had just happened. Brenda Patterson had gone from accusing me of violating a snow emergency to threatening me with some kind of HOA tribunal, all before 8 in the morning. I finished my coffee, took the longest shower of my life, and fell into bed still trying to figure out how my Tuesday had gone so completely sideways. Sleep came hard and fast, the kind of deep, dreamless unconsciousness that follows extreme exhaustion. When I woke up, my bedroom was dark and my phone was buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen. 4:30 in the afternoon. I'd slept for almost 8 hours. The phone showed 17 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and 14 text messages. I scrolled through them, my confusion turning to disbelief, and then to something approaching anger. 3 calls from Brenda. 5 calls from other numbers I didn't recognize, but which had left voicemails identifying themselves as members of the HOA board. 2 calls from the Lakewood Police Department non-emergency line. 1 call from my next-door neighbor, Ruth Mendez, warning me that Brenda had been going door to door collecting testimony about my pattern of violations. The text messages were worse. Screenshots of HOA covenant sections. Photos of my house from various angles, presumably documenting violations I didn't know I'd committed. A formal notice of the evening's meeting with a list of charges that read like something from a criminal indictment. One message stood out from the others. It was from Jerry Holloway, my best friend since college and, conveniently, an attorney who specialized in property law. Dude, what did you do to piss off your HOA? Got a weird call from someone named Brenda asking if I was your lawyer. Told her I couldn't discuss clients. She threatened to sue me for obstruction. Call me when you get this. I called him immediately. The HOA Karen strikes again, Jerry answered, not bothering with hello. Tell me everything. I did, starting with pulling into my driveway that morning and ending with Brenda's demand I attend tonight's meeting. Jerry listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him and probably meant he was taking this more seriously than I'd hoped. Okay, he said when I finished. So here's the situation. She's technically right that you violated the snow emergency order from a purely factual standpoint. You were out driving. However, as a certified paramedic traveling to and from your place of employment at a hospital, you're categorically exempt from those restrictions. Ohio Revised Code Section 4511.44 is pretty clear on that. So I didn't do anything wrong. Legally, no. You're completely in the clear. The problem is your HOA. They can be tricky because they're a private organization with contractual authority. You did sign the covenant when you bought the house, which means you agreed to abide by their rules. The question is whether their rules can supersede state law regarding emergency vehicle exemptions. And can they? Hell no. But that won't stop them from trying to make your life miserable. HOAs have a lot of power when it comes to fines, liens, and generally being a pain in the backside. The fact that Brenda is already talking about patterns of violations and mandatory meetings tells me she's building a case for escalating penalties. I sat up in bed, running a hand through my hair. Jerry, my grass was half an inch too long in September. She's using that as evidence of something. That's exactly what I'm talking about. She's constructing a narrative where you're a problem resident who needs to be brought to heel. The snow emergency thing is just the biggest example. Everything else is supporting evidence that you don't respect the community standards. This is insane. Welcome to HOA living, my friend. I've seen associations foreclose on houses over unpaid fines for violations like having the wrong color mailbox. These things can escalate quickly if you're not careful. He paused. Are you really working tonight? Yeah, 6 to 6. Already confirmed with my supervisor. Good. Don't skip work for this meeting. That shows you have actual professional obligations that supersede HOA demands. It also establishes a pattern that you're not just avoiding them. In the meantime, I'll draft a letter on firm letterhead explaining your employment status, your exemption from travel bans, and the relevant case law. That should shut this down pretty quickly. You think a letter will stop Brenda Patterson? Jerry laughed. Probably not. But it'll give you legal cover when she inevitably does something stupid. And Brandon, document everything. Every interaction, every phone call, every time she shows up at your house or contacts you. HOA disputes can get ugly, and you want a paper trail. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. I sat in the growing darkness of my bedroom, feeling the weight of the situation settling over me. I'd bought this house 3 years ago, right after the divorce, specifically because Willowbrook Estates seemed like a quiet, peaceful neighborhood. Nice families, well-maintained properties, the kind of place where you could just live your life without drama. I'd been wrong about the drama part. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Brenda. This is your final reminder about tonight's mandatory meeting. Failure to attend will result in escalated penalties, including fines up to $500 per day for continued violations. The board takes these matters very seriously. I typed back a response. I'm working tonight as previously explained. I'm a paramedic. I save lives. I cannot and will not skip work to attend an HOA meeting. Have a good evening. Her response came within seconds. Your excuses are noted and rejected. See you at 7. I got up, got dressed, and started getting ready for my shift. Whatever Brenda had planned for tonight's meeting, she'd have to do it without me. I had actual important work to do. The hospital was chaos when I arrived at 6. The storm had created the predictable aftermath of accidents, injuries, and weather-related medical emergencies. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. Checking vitals, assisting with trauma cases, running between the ER and the ambulance bay, the familiar rhythm of emergency medicine. Around 8:30, during a brief lull, one of the other paramedics, Sarah Kimball, found me in the break room staring at my phone. You okay? She asked, pouring herself coffee from the pot that had probably been sitting there since morning. You look stressed. HOA issues, I said. My neighbor accused me of violating the snow emergency yesterday. Doesn't believe I'm actually a paramedic. Now she's trying to find me and drag me in front of some kind of tribunal. Sarah snorted. Let me guess, middle-aged white woman with highlighted hair and a sense of entitlement that could fill a football stadium. You know Brenda Patterson, I know the type. They're everywhere. Had one at my old apartment complex who tried to have my car towed because it was apparently parked 3 inches over the line in my assigned spot. 3 inches. She sat down across from me. What are you going to do? My lawyer friend is drafting a letter. Hopefully that'll be enough to make her back off. And if it's not, I shrugged, then I guess I go to war with my HOA, which is the last thing I need right now. We got called back to work before I could elaborate. A multi-car pileup on I-90, several critical patients incoming. The HOA meeting happening across town, Brenda Patterson's threats. The whole ridiculous situation faded into background noise as I focused on what actually mattered. It was almost midnight when I finally checked my phone again. 23 new messages. I scrolled through them with growing disbelief. The HOA meeting had apparently happened without me, and the board had voted unanimously to fine me in violation of multiple covenant sections. The list of fines was staggering. $500 for the snow emergency violation, $200 for failure to attend a mandatory meeting, $100 for each of the previous infractions Brenda had documented: grass length, parking violations, late holiday decorations. All told, they were demanding I pay nearly $2,000 within 30 days or face additional penalties, including a lien on my property. There were photos from the meeting. Brenda standing in front of a presentation screen showing pictures of my house, pointing at alleged violations with a laser pointer like she was prosecuting a federal case. Other board members, all looking serious and official, sitting at a long table with folders and documents spread out before them. One message stood out from Ruth Mendez. "I'm so sorry, Brandon. I tried to speak up for you, but they wouldn't let me. This isn't right. Call me when you can." I called Jerry instead. He answered on the second ring despite the late hour. "I was wondering when you'd see the messages," he said. "I got copied on the official notice they sent. Brandon, they're serious about this. They've already filed paperwork with the county recorder's office for a pre-lien notice." "Can they actually do that?" "Unfortunately, yes. If the HOA fines you according to their covenant procedures and you don't pay, they can place a lien on your property. That lien can eventually lead to foreclosure if it goes unpaid long enough. It's extreme, but it's legal." I closed my eyes, leaning against the break room wall. "So what do I do?" "First, don't pay anything." Paying the fines could be seen as admitting guilt and agreeing to their authority over this situation. Second, I'm going to file a response with the HOA disputing all of these fines on multiple grounds, including that their attempt to enforce a violation of state emergency vehicle exemptions is invalid. Third, we're going to request all documentation of their procedures to ensure they followed their own covenant rules in assessing these penalties. And if that doesn't work, then we go to court and let a judge explain to them how reality works, but I don't think it'll come to that. Most HOAs back down when they realize they're on shaky legal ground. The problem is board members like your friend Brenda who have convinced themselves they're protecting the neighborhood when really they're just drunk on a tiny amount of power. We talked strategy for another 20 minutes. Jerry promised to have his letter ready by morning and to file it with the HOA before the end of the business day. I thanked him, hung up, and tried to focus on the rest of my shift. The next morning, driving home through streets still lined with plowed snow, I saw Brenda's car parked in front of my house. She was sitting in the driver's seat, clearly waiting for me. I considered just parking in my garage and going inside without engaging, but something told me that would only make things worse. I pulled into my driveway and got out. Brenda emerged from her car immediately, clutching a manila folder. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "I'm aware of the meeting results," I replied, "and I'm aware that you're attempting to fine me nearly $2,000 for violations I didn't commit. My attorney is filing a formal response today." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that I'd actually gotten a lawyer involved. "Your attorney can file whatever he wants. The fines stand. The board voted unanimously. The board voted to fine me for violating a snow emergency even though I'm legally exempt as a first responder. That's not enforceable, Brenda. You're wasting everyone's time. You keep saying you're a first responder. You keep saying you're exempt, but you've provided no proof." She opened the manila folder, pulling out a printed document. According to the Ohio Revised Code, Emergency vehicle exemptions apply to police, fire, and emergency medical services while operating authorized emergency vehicles. Your personal vehicle doesn't qualify. I stared at her. I was traveling to and from work at a hospital. That's covered under the same exemption. Show me where it says that. Brenda, I'm not arguing state law with you in my driveway at 7 in the morning. My attorney is handling this. If you have questions, you can direct them to him. I have questions for you. She pulled out more papers. How long have you lived in this neighborhood, Brandon? 3 years. You know that. And in those 3 years, how many HOA meetings have you attended? I don't know. A few. I work weird hours. I can't always make them. You've attended 2 meetings in 3 years. 2. Out of 36 monthly meetings and a dozen special sessions. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me you don't care about this community. It tells me you see your house as just a place to sleep between shifts, not as part of a larger neighborhood that requires participation and investment from all its residents. Brenda, I pay my HOA dues on time. I maintain my property. I follow the rules to the best of my ability while working a demanding job that involves saving lives. I'm sorry if I can't attend every meeting, but that doesn't make me a bad neighbor. It makes you a disengaged neighbor. And disengaged neighbors lead to declining property values, which affects all of us. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. I've been president of this HOA for 7 years. You know what I've accomplished in that time. I've kept our streets clean. I've maintained our common areas. I've kept undesirables from bringing down the quality of this neighborhood. I've worked tirelessly to ensure that Willowbrook Estates remains a place people want to live. And I appreciate that. But none of that gives you the right to harass me for doing my job. It gives me the right to hold you accountable when you violate community standards. And right now, Brandon, you are in violation of multiple sections of our covenant. You can either pay the fines, agree to attend mandatory HOA meetings for the next year, and sign a compliance agreement promising to adhere to all neighborhood standards, or you can continue down this path and see where it leads. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something almost sad beneath all the anger and self-righteousness. Here was a woman who'd built her entire identity around being HOA president, who measured her worth by how well she could control the neighborhood around her. In her mind, she really was protecting the community. She really did believe that someone parking on the street overnight or letting their grass grow half an inch too long was a threat to everything she'd built. I'm not signing anything, I said quietly. I'm not paying fines for violations I didn't commit. And I'm not going to be bullied into attending meetings or agreeing to whatever compliance program you've dreamed up. I live here, I pay my dues, and I follow the rules. If that's not enough for you, then we'll let the lawyers and the courts figure it out. Brenda's face hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She stood there for another moment, then turned and walked back to her car without another word. I watched her drive away, then went inside and collapsed on my couch. The next week was a blur of escalation. Jerry sent his letter to the HOA board, clearly outlining my legal status as a paramedic, my exemption from travel bans, and the multiple ways in which the HOA's fines were invalid and unenforceable. The board responded with their own letter, doubling down on their position and increasing the fines to include daily penalties for non-compliance. Brenda started a campaign. She went door to door in the neighborhood, telling anyone who would listen that I was a problem resident who refused to respect community standards. She posted about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, carefully avoiding naming me directly but making it very clear who she was talking about. She sent emails to all residents warning of the dangers of letting covenant violations go unpunished. Some neighbors bought into it. I started getting dirty looks at the mailbox. Someone left a printed copy of the HOA covenant on my doorstep, with sections highlighted in yellow. A few people I'd considered friends stopped responding to texts, but others pushed back. Ruth Mendez started her own counter-campaign, reminding people that I was a paramedic who worked long hours helping the community. Michael Chen posted on Facebook about the time I'd helped his wife when she'd had an allergic reaction, keeping her stable until the ambulance arrived. Other neighbors shared their own stories of times I'd helped them with medical questions or minor emergencies. The neighborhood divided into factions. Team Brenda versus Team Brandon, though I hated that characterization. I didn't want a team. I didn't want a war. I just wanted to live in my house and do my job without being harassed. 3 weeks after the initial confrontation, Jerry called me with news. They rejected our settlement proposal. I'd been hoping we could resolve this quietly. Jerry had proposed that the HOA drop all fines related to the snow emergency in exchange for me agreeing to attend quarterly meetings and paying a minimal fine for the previous minor infractions. It seemed reasonable. What did they say? I asked. Brenda said, and I quote, "Mr. Blake needs to learn that actions have consequences and that no one is above the rules." She's demanding full payment of all fines plus an additional $500 to cover the HOA's legal consultation fees. Legal consultation fees. They have a lawyer now. Some guy who does cut-rate HOA work. I looked him up. He mostly files liens and foreclosures. Not exactly a legal scholar. Jerry paused. Brandon, I think we need to escalate this. File a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment and improper use of their authority. Force them to defend their actions in court. That's going to be expensive. Yeah, but I think we can win. And honestly, at this point, it might be the only way to get Brenda to back off. She's clearly not responding to reason. I thought about it for a long moment. The idea of suing my own HOA, of dragging this whole mess into court, felt like defeat. It meant admitting that we couldn't solve this like adults, but Jerry was right. Brenda had shown no indication that she was willing to compromise or even acknowledge that she might be wrong. Do it, I said. File the lawsuit. The lawsuit hit the neighborhood like a bomb. Within hours of Jerry filing the paperwork with the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas, everyone knew. The Facebook group exploded with arguments. Some people supported me, saying the HOA had overstepped. Others defended Brenda, insisting that the covenant had to be enforced or the whole system would collapse into chaos. Brenda herself sent me a text message. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life. The board will fight this to the end and we will win. You will lose your house, your reputation, and your standing in this community. I hope you think it was worth it." I showed the message to Jerry. "Is that a threat?" "It's definitely aggressive. Save it. Add it to the file." He sounded almost cheerful. "This is actually good for us." Shows she's not acting rationally. A judge will see that. The local news picked up the story. A reporter from Cleveland's Scene magazine called me, wanting to do a piece on HOA overreach. I declined the interview, not wanting to make this any more public than it already was, but the reporter did the story anyway, based on court documents and interviews with other neighbors. The article painted Brenda as a power-hungry HOA president and me as the sympathetic paramedic, just trying to do my job. Brenda was furious. She posted a long response on Facebook, accusing the media of bias and me of manipulating the narrative. She insisted she was protecting property values and community standards, that people like me who thought they were above the rules were the real problem. The comments section turned into a battlefield. People I'd never even met were weighing in, some supporting me, others insisting that HOAs existed for a reason and that I should have just paid the fines and moved on. Through all of this, I kept working, kept showing up for shifts, kept responding to emergencies, kept doing the job that had started this whole mess. There was something grounding about it, about having a purpose that existed entirely outside the neighborhood drama. At the hospital, I was useful. I was needed. I was making a difference in ways that actually mattered. 2 months after the initial driveway confrontation, we had our first court date. It was a preliminary hearing, mostly procedural, but Jerry insisted I attend. We met at the courthouse in downtown Cleveland, an imposing building with marble columns and the kind of institutional gravitas that makes everyone speak in hushed tones. Brenda was there with the HOA's lawyer, a thin man in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She'd brought several other board members with her, a show of solidarity that Jerry said was meant to intimidate me. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Kim, listened to both sides present their preliminary arguments. Jerry outlined my position clearly. I was a certified paramedic, exempt from snow emergency travel bans, and the HOA had no authority to fine me for legally traveling to and from work. Additionally, the pattern of harassment that followed, including the excessive fines for minor infractions and Brenda's threatening messages, constituted abuse of HOA authority. The HOA's lawyer argued that the covenant gave the board broad discretion to enforce community standards, that I'd signed the covenant voluntarily, and that the board had followed all proper procedures in assessing fines. Judge Kim asked a few pointed questions, mostly directed at the HOA's lawyer. Did he have documentation of the board's procedures? Had they given proper notice of violations before assessing fines? Had they followed their own written policies? The lawyer stammered through answers, referencing documents he clearly hadn't reviewed thoroughly. It wasn't going well for them. Judge Kim called a recess and asked both lawyers to meet with her in chambers. I sat in the courtroom with Brenda and the other board members, the silence awkward and heavy. She kept glancing at me, her expression unreadable. After 20 minutes, Jerry emerged looking satisfied. The judge strongly encouraged settlement. She indicated that she doesn't think the HOA's case is very strong and that forcing this to trial would be expensive and time-consuming for everyone. She's giving both sides 2 weeks to negotiate in good faith. What does that mean? I asked. It means we have leverage. The HOA is going to have to come to the table with a real offer or risk getting destroyed in court. Over the next 2 weeks, Jerry and the HOA's lawyer went back and forth. The offers got progressively more reasonable. First, they dropped all fines related to the snow emergency, but insisted I pay for the other violations and attend monthly meetings. Jerry rejected it. Then they offered to drop all fines if I agreed to serve on an HOA committee. Jerry rejected that too. Finally, a week before the next court date, they sent their final offer. All fines dropped completely. No admission of guilt from either side. Both parties agreed to move forward without further legal action. The HOA would add a clause to their covenant explicitly acknowledging that first responders are exempt from travel bans when traveling to and from work. Take it, Jerry advised. It's everything we wanted. You pay nothing, they back down completely, and they have to change their covenant to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. It's a total win. I signed the settlement agreement that afternoon. It was over, except it wasn't, not really. The lawsuit might have been resolved, but living in Willowbrook Estates had fundamentally changed. Brenda never apologized. She never acknowledged that she'd been wrong or that she'd taken things too far. At the next HOA meeting, she announced the settlement like it had been her idea, spinning it as a reasonable compromise that protected both the community standards and the rights of first responders. Some people in the neighborhood never forgave me for suing the HOA. They saw it as an attack on the community itself, as proof that I didn't care about property values or neighborhood cohesion. I'd get cold shoulders at the grocery store, passive-aggressive comments at the gas station, but others became genuine friends. Ruth Mendez and her husband started inviting me to dinner. Michael Chen and I started a tradition of watching football games together on Sundays when I wasn't working. A few other neighbors, tired of Brenda's iron-fisted approach to HOA management, started talking about running for board positions in the next election. The real change came 6 months later. Brenda announced she was stepping down as HOA president, citing personal reasons. The truth, according to Ruth, who'd heard it from another board member, was that several residents had threatened to file their own lawsuits if she continued. The board had quietly asked her to resign before things got worse. Her replacement was a retired teacher named Paul Morrison, a soft-spoken man who approached HOA management with actual reasonableness. One of his first acts was to revise the covenant to clarify enforcement procedures and limit the board's ability to assess excessive fines for minor violations. He also established a formal appeals process so residents could challenge board decisions without having to file lawsuits. I ran into Brenda one Saturday morning about a year after our initial confrontation. I was getting my mail when she pulled up to the mailbox in her Mercedes. We made eye contact. For a moment I thought she might just drive away without speaking. Instead, she rolled down her window. "Your grass looks nice," she said stiffly. "Very well maintained." "Thanks," I replied, not sure what else to say. She sat there for another moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. "I was trying to protect the neighborhood," she said finally. "That's all I was ever trying to do." "I know," I said, and meant it. "But sometimes trying to protect something means knowing when to back off." She nodded slowly, then rolled up her window and drove away. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was something. An acknowledgement, maybe, that things had gotten out of hand, that her attempt to maintain control had nearly destroyed the very community she'd been trying to preserve. 2 years later, I'm still living in Willowbrook Estates. I still work at Metro Health Medical Center, still pull double shifts during storms and holidays, still come home exhausted to a house that's usually quiet except for the occasional HOA newsletter slipped under my door. The new board is reasonable. They still enforce the covenant, but with actual common sense and an understanding that people have lives outside the neighborhood. My grass is sometimes half an inch too long. My holiday decorations sometimes stay up a few extra days. No one threatens to fine me. I served on the Community Safety Committee for a year, helping to establish emergency procedures and first aid training for interested residents. It felt good, using my actual expertise to help the neighborhood instead of fighting with it. Brenda moved away 8 months ago. Downsized to a condo in Westlake, according to Ruth. No HOA to run there, just a management company that handles everything. I wondered if she missed it, that sense of authority and control. Or if maybe she was relieved, freed from the constant pressure of maintaining standards and enforcing rules that, in the end, mattered far less than she'd believed. I think about that morning sometimes, seeing her standing in my driveway like a sentinel, absolutely convinced she was in the right. The certainty in her voice when she accused me of lying about being a paramedic. The way she'd constructed an entire case against me based on grass height and parking violations, and one snow emergency trip that she'd decided to interpret as evidence of my disrespect for the community. Jerry once told me that HOA disputes bring out the worst in people because they involve the two things Americans value most: property and control. Everyone wants to protect their investment. Everyone wants to feel like they have some say over their environment. Put those two things together in a legal framework that gives a small group of people authority over everyone else, and you have a recipe for conflict. He was right, of course, but I also learned something else from the whole experience. Most people, even people like Brenda, aren't actually evil or malicious. They're scared. Scared of change, scared of losing value, scared of chaos creeping into the ordered world they've tried to build. They react to that fear by grasping for control, by enforcing rules and standards that make them feel safe. The problem comes when that need for control overrides common sense and basic human decency. When someone becomes so focused on maintaining order that they forget the actual point of having a community in the first place. To support each other, to be good neighbors, to create a place where people can live their lives without constantly looking over their shoulders wondering what rule they might have accidentally broken. I still drive through the neighborhood during snow emergencies, heading to and from the hospital. No one questions it anymore. The covenant explicitly protects my right to do so. Sometimes I see neighbors out shoveling their driveways and we wave to each other. Sometimes Ruth texts me asking if the roads are bad, knowing I'll have the most recent information. Sometimes Michael asks me to check on his elderly mother who lives across town, confident that I'll know what to look for and when to be concerned. That's what community should be. Not enforcement and fines and threats, but actual human connection and mutual support. It took a lawsuit and months of neighborhood drama to get there, but we did. Willowbrook Estates is better now than it was under Brenda's rule, even if some people won't admit it. Last week, I got called to a house fire on the east side of Cleveland. A family of 4, smoke inhalation, minor burns. We got them out, got them stabilized, got them to the hospital. Routine, as much as saving lives can ever be routine. Driving home afterward, still in my uniform because I'd forgotten my change of clothes, I passed a house with grass that was definitely longer than 3 inches. Christmas lights still up even though it was March. A car parked on the street overnight. I smiled and kept driving. Some rules just aren't worth enforcing. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. Drinks this weekend. My treat since you're paying my fees on time. You charged me friend rates, they were already your treat, I typed back. But yes, Saturday work, perfect. Bring stories from the HOA meeting. I heard Paul accidentally used Comic Sans on the newsletter and someone complained. I laughed. Comic Sans, the new frontier of HOA controversy. I could live with that. The sun was setting as I pulled into my driveway, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the lingering snow banks. My house looked good, exactly as well maintained as it had always been, regardless of whether Brenda approved or not. I went inside, dropped my bag by the door, and stood in my living room for a moment just appreciating the peace and quiet. No one waiting in my driveway to accuse me of violations. No threatening text messages. No manila folders full of photographic evidence of my grass being half an inch too long. Just home. My home. In a neighborhood that had finally learned the difference between community standards and community support. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the Willowbrook Estates Facebook group, something I'd avoided for months during the height of the conflict. The most recent post was from Paul, announcing a neighborhood cookout for Memorial Day. Voluntary, of course. No attendance requirements or fines for missing it, Dozens of comments from residents saying they'd be there, offering to bring dishes, asking about dietary restrictions. Normal people being normal neighbors. It was almost boring in its wholesomeness. Ruth had posted a comment tagging me. Someone needs to be in charge of first aid station. I nominate Brandon. Several people had liked the comment and added their own support. Great idea. Brandon would be perfect. Can you teach us CPR while you're at it? I typed a response. Happy to help with first aid station and can do CPR training if people are interested. Let me know. The likes and supportive comments came immediately. This was what I'd moved to the suburbs for. Not perfectly maintained grass and strictly enforced parking rules, but actual human connection. People looking out for each other. A real community instead of just a collection of houses governed by a covenant. My work phone rang. The hospital, calling me in early for a shift because someone had called out sick. I grabbed my bag, checked that I had everything I needed, and headed back out to my Jeep. Driving through the neighborhood toward the main road, I passed Brenda's old house. The new owners had repainted it a cheerful blue instead of the beige it had been. They'd planted colorful flowers in the front garden, adding personality and warmth. I'd met them once, a young couple with a toddler. Nice people. The husband worked in IT, the wife was a teacher. They'd asked me about the neighborhood, and I'd told them honestly that it was great, that the HOA was reasonable, that the neighbors were friendly. I didn't mention the lawsuit or the months of drama, or the way the community had nearly torn itself apart over snow emergency travel and grass height. That was the past. They deserved to start fresh, to form their own opinions based on the neighborhood as it existed now, not as it had been under Brenda's regime. The roads were clear, no snow in sight. Spring was coming, that brief beautiful window between Ohio winter and Ohio summer when everything was green and alive, and the weather was actually pleasant. I'd probably have to mow my lawn soon. Maybe this year I'd measure it carefully, make sure it stayed under 3 inches. Or maybe I'd just mow it when it looked like it needed mowing, the way normal people do. The way I'd always done before Brenda made me hyper-aware of every potential violation lurking in my yard. The hospital rose ahead of me, a massive complex of buildings representing everything I'd become a paramedic to be part of, helping people, making a difference, doing work that actually mattered in ways that transcended property values and community standards. I parked in the employee lot, grabbed my ID badge from the visor, and headed inside. The automatic doors whooshed open, and the familiar smell of disinfectant and floor wax and that indefinable hospital smell hit me. I was home here too, in a different way. This was where I belonged, where my skills and training and dedication translated directly into saved lives and eased suffering. Sarah was at the nurse's station when I walked in. "You're early. Thought you weren't on until 8. Marcus called out, asked if I could cover. "Of course you said yes, because you're incapable of saying no to extra shifts." She handed me a tablet with patient charts. Relatively quiet night so far. Couple of chest pains, one broken arm from a trampoline incident, standard stuff. We worked together for the next 10 hours, the steady rhythm of emergency medicine that I'd grown to love. Each patient was a story, a problem to solve, a person who needed help. Some were simple, quick fixes that sent them home within an hour. Others were complex, requiring careful assessment and coordination with specialists. Around midnight, we got a call about a car accident on the highway. Multiple vehicles, several critical injuries. Sarah and I rode in the ambulance, racing through dark streets with sirens wailing and lights flashing. The scene was chaos. Twisted metal and shattered glass. People standing around dazed and bleeding, fire trucks and police cars with their lights painting everything in red and blue strobes. We went to work immediately, triaging injuries, stabilizing patients, coordinating transport to the hospital. One of the victims, a young woman maybe 25 years old, had been traveling home from her nursing shift when someone lost control on black ice and caused the pileup. She was conscious but in pain, scared and asking if she was going to be okay. "You're going to be fine," I told her, checking her vitals and looking for obvious injuries. "Looks like a broken collarbone and some cuts, but nothing life-threatening. We're going to get you to the hospital and get you fixed up." "I was just trying to get home," she said, tears running down her face. "I just wanted to go home. I know, you did everything right. Sometimes bad things just happen." I got her stabilized and loaded into the ambulance. "Stay with me, okay? Keep talking to me. Tell me about your shift. What department do you work in?" She talked all the way to the hospital, her voice shaky but growing stronger, talking about her patients, her coworkers, the long hours, and the satisfaction of helping people. I listened and monitored her vitals and thought about how random life could be. One moment you're driving home from work, the next you're in an ambulance wondering if you'll ever feel normal again. We got her to the ER and handed her off to the trauma team. As I was restocking the ambulance for the next call, I got a text from Ruth. "Just saw on the news about the highway accident. Stay safe out there. Let me know when you get home." I smiled and typed back, "All good. Should be home by 9 tomorrow morning. Save me some of those cookies you're always baking." Deal. "We're lucky to have you in the neighborhood, Brandon, not just as a paramedic but as a friend. Don't ever forget that." I put my phone away and climbed back into the ambulance. Sarah was in the driver's seat, updating our status with dispatch. "Ready for round 2?" she asked. "Always." We drove back into the night, ready for whatever came next. No HOA meetings, no covenant violations, no drama about grass height or parking spaces or snow emergency travel bans. Just the work, the purpose, the reason I'd chosen this path in the first place. Brenda had been wrong about a lot of things, but maybe the most fundamental error was believing that the rules mattered more than the people they were meant to serve. That property values and community standards were more important than basic human decency and respect. That she had the authority to tell me I couldn't do my job, couldn't save lives, couldn't be the person I'd trained for years to become. The settlement had been about more than just money or legal vindication. It had been about establishing, once and for all, that some things are bigger than HOA covenants. Some obligations supersede neighborhood rules. Some people, like first responders, have responsibilities that don't fit neatly into the ordered world of suburban community associations. Paul understood that. The new board understood that. Most of my neighbors understood that. And the ones who didn't, well, they'd either come around eventually or they wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer my problem. My shift ended at 9 the next morning. I drove home through morning traffic, past people heading to office jobs and school drop-offs and all the normal routines of suburban life. Willowbrook Estates looked peaceful in the morning light. Houses neat and orderly, yards well-maintained, everything exactly as it should be. I pulled into my driveway, noting that my grass was starting to look a little long. Probably needed mowing in the next week or so. I'd get to it when I could, between shifts and sleep, and the general chaos of life as a first responder. And if it grew half an inch too long before I got around to it, well, that was fine too. Some standards just aren't worth the stress. I went inside, took a long shower, and fell into bed with the satisfaction of knowing that I'd made a difference last night. The young woman would recover. The other accident victims would heal. Lives had been saved because I'd been there, doing my job, using my training and experience to help people in their worst moments. That mattered more than any HOA covenant ever could. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about Brenda one last time. Wondered if she ever thought about me, about the confrontation that had spiraled so far out of control. Wondered if she'd learned anything from the experience or if she'd just moved on, convinced she'd been right all along. It didn't really matter anymore. The war was over. The neighborhood had moved on. Life continued, messy and imperfect and occasionally requiring me to violate snow emergency bans to get to work, but fundamentally good. I was home in every sense of the word. And no one, not Brenda or any other HOA president, could take that away from me. The sun streamed through my bedroom window, warming my face. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the neighborhood coming to life. Kids playing, lawn mowers starting up, the ice cream truck making its rounds even though it was barely spring. Normal, beautiful, ordinary life in Willowbrook Estates. Exactly as it should be.